Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskrityam Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udirayet Nashtaprayeshvabhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavater Uttama Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki Srinvata Swakatha Krishna Punyashravana Kirtanaha Hridayantastoya Bhadrani Vidnoti Suhritsatam. Hare Krishna. So today we are reading from Canto 3, Chapter 20, Verse 20, conversation between Vidura and Maitreya. And we have just finished the section of Varahadev killing Hiranyaksha, and we are currently discussing the whole process of Lord Brahma creating various entities and as part of his creation. So we'll be reading verse 22, 23, 24 today. So verse 22, Devataha prabhaya ya divyan pramukato srijat te aharshur devayanto vishrishtam tam prabhamaha. Virtuer Devataha, the demigods, prabhaya, with the glory of light, ya, those who, divyan, shining, pramukataha, chiefly, asrijat, created, they, aharshuhu, took possession of, devayantaha, being active, vishrishtam, separated, tam, that, prabham, effulgent form, aha, daytime. Translation: He then created the chief demigods, who were shining with the glory of goodness. He dropped before them the effulgent form of daytime, and the demigods sportingly took possession of it. Purport: Demons who were born from the creation of night and demigods were born from the creation of day. In other words, demons like yakshas, rakshasas, are born of the quality of ignorance, and demigods are born of the quality of goodness. Verse 23. Devo devan jagannathaha srijati smat. Sorry. Devo devan jagannathaha srijati smati lupan ta enam lolupataya maitunaya bhibit. Translation: Lord Brahma then gave birth to demons from his buttocks, and they were very fond of sex. Because they were too lustful, they approached him for copulation. Purport: Sex life is the background of material existence. Here also it is repeated that demons are very fond of sex life. The more one is free from the desires of sex, the more he is promoted to the level of demigods. The more one is inclined to enjoy sex, the more he is degraded to the level of demoniac life. Verse 24. Tato hasansa bhagavan asurair nirapatrabhai anviyamanastarasa krudho bhita parapatat. Translation: The worshipful Brahma first laughed at their stupidity, but finding the shameless Asura close upon him, he grew indignant and ran in great haste out of fear. Purport: Sexually inclined demons have no respect even for their father, and the best policy for a saintly father like Lord Brahma is to leave such demoniac sons. We'll offer some prayers and then get into the discussion. Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sabitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sagana Raghunathanvidam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Sorry, I messed up the verse. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Sorry, I think I'm in an unnecessary haste today. Thank you everyone for joining this morning. So we are in the section of the whole process of creation. And this sequence is talking about the creation of different modes and the personalities who are predominated by those modes. So as we understand from Bhagavad Gita, there are three modes, the mode of goodness, the mode of passion, and the mode of ignorance. So as Maitreya is right now telling to Vidura, here we are speaking about, in the previous verses, I think yesterday Sundar Leela Mataji covered the verse, we discussed about yakshas and rakshasas who are predominated by the mode of ignorance. And today we are discussing about the other two modes, the mode of goodness, which is predominated again by the demigods. And in the next verse, the subsequent two verses, the 23 and 24, we are discussing about the mode of ignorance, which is predominated by demons. And as we all understand, being the students of Srila Prabhupada, as we all understand, Srila Prabhupada discusses the difference between demigods and the demons, as demigods are somebody who helps the Supreme Personality of Godhead in his process of elevating the conditioned souls from their conditioned nature into their original actual nature of rendering service. And the demons are anybody who are not assisting the Supreme Personality of Godhead with that whole thing. And as we see, if we see in the verse 23, I always had this kind of slight confusion. How do we kind of, how is it that so simple that it's, if you are a demigod, then you're basically undid this. And the only difference between the demigods and demons is that, and if you see in this verse of verse 23, the way Srila Prabhupada also translates, and the verse is Devo Devan. So it in the word-to-word translation, Srila Prabhupada says Devaha as Lord Brahma, because the whole discussion is about Lord Brahma giving birth to various entities. And then the next word that comes is Adevan, which is demons. So as we all understand, anything that's attached to when the word A is attached to any word, then it becomes the opposite of that. So Deva, as we all understand, is the demigods, and anybody who is not a demigod, a Devan, is the demon. And these demons are primarily captivated by the mode of passion, which again is illustrated by the specific property, by the specific quality of them being very fond of sex. And in the subsequent verses, we also discuss about the whole timing of as Maitreya is discussing the previous verses of 20, like 20, starting from 20, 21, 22. He initially discussed that yakshas and rakshasas kind of took control of the whole time of twilight, took control of the time of the night. And then, as we see here in the verse 22, the demigods are actually taking control of the daytime. So it's also interesting that after every creation, Lord Brahma is discarding that form of that form of whatever the form that he has used for progeniting or creating that specific entity, like either in the case of yakshas or even here in the case of demigods, or in the subsequent verses we also hear how he kind of lets go of the form that he has used for creating the demons. So after every creation that's happening, is actually literally kind of everything is again starting from square one of taking himself a body, because here he says, he then created the chief demigods who were shining with the glory of goodness. He dropped before them the effulgent form of daytime. So the form, whatever he was using for creating the demigods, he dropped that form in the form of daytime. And then the demigods took control of that. And in the subsequent verses, we also hear that the form that he has used for creating the demons, Lord Vishnu then instructs him, because of the whole attack that he is currently undergoing from the demons. Lord Vishnu later in subsequent verses tells him that to kind of let go of that form. And further in the verses also, any entity that he is creating with a specific form is basically letting go of that form, kind of giving them the control. And then, so through this way, he's creating the entities as part of his creation. And similarly, as part of this creation, is not only creating the entities, but also creating the times of the day. And through this, we also understand from Srila Prabhupada's teachings that there's a reason. I remember hearing this verse, but I'm not able to exactly get it exactly into my from my memory recollection, or I was not even able to look for that. If any of you have it kind of handy, but we can share it later. It says there's a specific uh, um, in the specific time of the day, there are specific like it basically talks about Srimad Bhagavatam, it talks about Ramayana, and it talks about Mahabharata. That depending on the time of the day, sorry, depending on the time of the day, we are supposed to read Bhagavatam at a certain time, Srimad Ramayanam at a certain time, and Mahabharata at a certain time. And the reason, again, we understand from this specific verses, the sequence of verses is, as we see here, it because there are specific personalities who are kind of controlling that time of the day, and there are certain activities which are predominated, which give you a multitude of result when you perform that activity during the time which is kind of conducive to the personalities who are controlling that time. Let's say, let's take the example of sleeping. As we all understand that the amount of sleep that we get, or the rest that the body gets when we sleep, let's say starting from 9 p.m. till 2 a.m., is almost much greater than the time of the amount of rest that we get when we kind of start sleeping from 2 a.m. Even if we consider the same time, 9 to 2 as being 5 hours, even if we sleep from 2 to 7, we don't get the same amount of rest. And it's not something that we'll have to do research, or kind of, we all have some experience due to various things. And anytime we kind of sleep late, even though we are extending the number of hours that we sleep, the body doesn't get the enough rest. But when we happen to sleep at the right time of around whatever time, 9 or 10, and then even if you are waking up for Mangalarti, or later in the day around anytime between 4 to 6, as long as you are getting that 6 to 8 hours of rest, our bodies feels fresh. So similar to that, we can't like, I sometimes have this experience where, because of various things, if I don't get to read Srimad Bhagavatam during the daytime, if I'm reading just before sleeping, it's a mess. Like, I'm just going through the pages, but there's nothing kind of sticking out, or there's no kind of connection that you develop as part of your reading. But the same thing that when we do in the daytime, especially in the morning time, when either it could be our chanting, or either it could be reading, or it could be also the hearing that we are doing. There's much more of a grasp that we kind of can get out of the same process that we are doing. And so so it, so so as every specific time of the day is predominated by a specific personality, as we understand here, like the daytime is kind of under the control of the demigods. And as we understand at the later time, the twilight, where um, the classic example of the birth of Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakashipu, which happened during the time of the twilight, where she was so much overcome. Diti was so much overcome by the whole sex desire that she kind of approached. Um, I forgot the name. Approached Kashyapa, and then even though Kashyapa was saying that this is not the right time, she was so overcome by the whole sex desire. The whole birth of Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakashipu happened, and as we all understand from in the subsequent verses, that the whole time of twilight, which is the time that Diti kind of approached Kashyapa, is actually controlled by the demons. And demons, by their nature, as Srila Prabhupada writes in the purport, the more one is inclined to enjoy sex, the more he is degraded to the level of demonic life. So it's that thing of having that sex desire, and the more you kind of inculcate into that thing, the more you kind of get into the whole mentality of enjoying sex. When we talk of sex, it's not just the physical intimacy of two entities kind of coming together for enjoying, but it's kind of understanding the core nature of the whole sex life as being, for my pleasure, for my satisfaction, I'm ready to kind of exploit the other person. So even in the case of, if you take even in the case of Mother Diti, when she approached Kashyapa, she basically says, I have this longing to kind of enjoy at this moment. It's the whole progenation that happened either in the case of Aditi. It was not that, oh, there is this a greater purpose. Kashyapa as the Prajapati is kind of is undergoing as the son of Lord Brahma. He's the Prajapati, so there's a process of creation that need to happen, which happened in the case of Mother Aditi. But in the case of Mother Aditi, it was the whole conception of rendering service was not there. Because the whole conception of rendering service was not there, what happened was she was in this greater mood of trying to, this is the time I feel like kind of enjoying your presence, and whatever it could be the case, like Kashyapa was trying to tell her, this is not the right time for performing. In case if you want to have sons, or even perform this activity of sex, this is not the right time. Let's wait for that. But Mother Diti was so overcome by this nature of trying to exploit that relationship, for lack of better term, kind of exploit that relationship of being in kind of trying to gather everything that is there for her pleasure and for her satisfaction. The outcome that we see is the birth of Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakashipu. Even though in a bigger sense, it's the play of the Lord that he wanted to kind of have Jaya and Vijaya take birth. From a Leela standpoint, everything kind of can be answered in a certain way. But for us to kind of understand the lessons, Mother Diti kind of, whatever the point that Srila Prabhupada is trying to say is, the more one is inclined to enjoy sex, the more he is degraded to the level of demoniac life. So even though Mother Diti is in that highest level of being the 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 wife of Kashyapa, who is the Prajapati, and like she was in such an elevated, exalted position. But because she was more and more inclined to having that of that nature of enjoying sex and enjoying the nature of trying to exploit the relationship, the outcome was she kind of was, for that moment at least, even though once everything was performed, she went back as she regretted the whole thing, and then Kashyapa kind of explains to her the reason and all of that. But if you just take that whole specific episode of discussion between Mother Diti and Kashyapa, where Diti is kind of pursuing Kashyapa for kind of satisfying her desires. If you just take that specific instance for us to kind of understand the lesson, this point that Srila Prabhupada is writing, the more one is inclined to enjoy sex, the more he is degraded to the level of demoniac life. And on the other side, we also see we have so many cases within the whole paradigm of devotees, the number of devotees that we know of. If you just take this as I was saying, when we are discussing about the concept of sex, it's not just about about two entities coming together in a physical interaction, physical intimacy, which is in the case of Mother Diti and Kashyapa, but undertaking the underlying principle of trying to exploit uh, the mutual relationship, and trying to see what is the best satisfaction that I can get. If you take just that example and see, the more one is free from the desire of sex, the more he is promoted to the level of demigods. And we see that across in many instances of devotees, either it could be starting with the Dhruva Maharaj, where in his whole persuasion, like when he started this whole process of kind of when he started going out from his home, he had this great desire of saying that I want the position which is beyond Lord Brahma, in a kind of, I want to be the highest person who kind of can control everything, can exploit everything, because I am taking away what is my rightful position of being with my father. And I want to get into that position of being the highest person who has control over everything, so that nobody will kind of take away from what I want. So that was the place where he started. And through the process of his journey of leaving his palace and this whole journey in the forest, and when he actually faced Lord Vishnu face to face, even though physically this Dhruva is also of 5 years age and this Dhruva was also of 5 years age, but there was so much of contrast between. And the underlying principle was he became free from the desire of sex. And that happened because in the case of Mother Diti, even though she was getting instructions from Kashyapa, who in being in the position of her husband, also being in the position of spiritual master, was telling her that this is not the right time. She was not ready to listen. She was not ready to take the grateful, not I don't think grateful is the right word. The magnanimous instructions that Kashyapa was giving to her, saying that this is not the right time for whatever you want to perform. She was not ready to take those instructions. But in the case of Dhruva Maharaj, as we understand, the moment, even though for both Mother Diti and Dhruva Maharaj, what their specific um, uh, what their specific spiritual masters were giving them was completely against what they were seeking to achieve. In the case of Mother Diti, she wanted to have whole sexual intercourse with Kashyapa because that was a longing desire, and Kashyapa was saying this is not the right time. And in the case of Dhruva Maharaj, also Narada Muni was saying this is not something that, as this 5-year-old boy, this is not something, a grudge or anger is not something that you have to carry. And that was not what Dhruva Maharaj also wanted to hear. So Dhruva Maharaj, yes, um, both of them kind of rejected the initial instruction that came from their spiritual master. But the only difference that was there is Mother Diti was kind of stuck to saying that this is what I want. But whereas in the case of Dhruva Maharaj, he was saying that whatever you kind of tell me makes sense, but this is not what I'm looking for. So can you please help me with the process that can help me achieve what I'm looking for? And when Narada Muni gave him the initial instruction was kind of not considered, but then Narada Muni, when he was seeked, and Narada Muni gave him the other further instruction of that this is the mantra, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, is the mantra that you have to chant, and this is the place that you could go, and this is the process how we chant. So in the case of Dhruva Maharaj, he had the blessings of his mother, who initially gave him the blessings of anything that we want to achieve is only achievable when you approach Supreme Personality of Godhead. That initial blessing of his initial spiritual master was also there, the Padapadakshaga Guru. And then, as Narada Muni being the original spiritual master across Bhagavatam, when he approached and he gave him further blessings of that this is the process that you have to perform and this is the mantra that you have to perform. And when he used that and then further implemented that as part of his process, he achieved that. He not only achieved his desire of innermost desire that he had in the beginning of where he wanted to have this highest and the biggest position across the universe. That was when the Lord appeared. That was not his desire, even though that was not his desire, because that's what he set out to achieve. The Lord granted him. But bigger than that, what happened was he was not only promoted to the level of demigods, he was promoted to much higher position than the level of demigods. And that happened, as Srila Prabhupada writes here, is because he became free from the desire of sex. And we all hear, it's not only in the case of Dhruva Maharaj. I just took the example of Dhruva Maharaj to kind of contrast and compare Mother Diti and Dhruva Maharaj with the position of the spiritual master. We also see this across many other examples of the sages from the Dandaka, where they approached in a kind of slight comparison, here also Lord Brahma was in the form of a male, and the demons were also in the form of the male. But there was this attraction that the demons were kind of having for Lord Brahma, but that attraction was not in was not in kind of accordance with the whole injunctions. It was to exploit Lord Brahma. Here is the person I just want to exploit and grab him for what he is. But as in the case of the sages of Dandaka, when they had this great longing for Lord Ram, the longing was coming from a position of rendering service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who was this all-attractive personality. So even though on an external level it might appear that the demons are also attracted to Lord Brahma, and the gopis are attracted to Krishna, the sages were attracted to Lord Ram, and across in many places, in many pastimes also we hear. But the underlying, on an external level, it might appear that what we are performing and what a great devotee is performing on an external level might appear the same. But the underlying, as we all see, the great example of the iceberg where the tip is seen, but the huge iceberg that's in the water is not seen. So similarly, in the case of Lord Brahma and the demons and the sages in the Dandaka to Lord Ramachandra, to gopis to Lord Krishna, the difference is of the underlying principle of, in one instance, they were more and more inclined to enjoy sex, which is in the case of the demons. As Srila Prabhupada writes here, Lord Brahma then gave birth to demons from his buttocks, and they were very fond of sex. But in the case of the sages or the gopis, they were just not fond of sex, but they were fond of giving pleasure for whatever needs to be done for the satisfaction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, whether it be in one of the purports to second canto, I think fifth chapter, that Srila Prabhupada writes that an advanced devotee takes pleasure in profound philosophical discussions of the Vedas and Srimad Bhagavatam, as much as the pleasure that he takes when he kisses the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So for an advanced devotee, the pleasure is not in the specific action that he's performing, but the pleasure is in understanding that whatever I'm trying to perform and will ultimately give pleasure to the Lord. So that just that idea of that, oh, just by me performing this arati, Radha Shamsundar are going to be happy. Just this idea of that whatever I'm trying to do will ultimately give pleasure to the divine couple. That's the whole idea of why a certain devotee performs in that case. So considering today being Lord Balram Jayanti, I just wanted to kind of again go back to that point of Mother Diti and Dhruva Maharaj. The biggest contrasting difference in either of their cases, where the initial thing was kind of achieving their innermost desire of kind of being the controller, which in many cases is the underlying desire for having this sex desire or the sex urge is. But the only difference in either of these cases was one personality, which is Mother Diti, was not ready to accept what her spiritual master, in this case Kashyapa, was giving her. Again, the same in physical relationship, it's he's her husband. So, but all from an ulterior position, he was in the position of spiritual master. But in the case of Dhruva Maharaj, also, even if we not are considering Narada Muni in that position of, the whole journey of Dhruva Maharaj started because he accepted his spiritual master, initial spiritual master of his mother, saying that whatever you want to achieve can only be achieved when you take shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And only because he accepted the instruction of his spiritual master, which is his mother, not just considering her on the bodily platform, you are my mother, you cannot understand what I'm going through. He didn't consider any of this bodily platform. He just accepted her as in the position of spiritual master, accepting her instruction, took the whole journey, and at the end he also got promoted to the higher level of being what he wanted to. But more than that, he kind of achieved the highest level of rendering service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But whereas in the case of Mother Diti, because she was not ready to accept the instructions of her spiritual master, the end result was the birth of two of the most cruel demons that we have of Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakashipu. So, considering today being the Lord Balram Jayanti, who all of us as understand is the original spiritual master, the source of his spiritual master for everyone, so the source of Lord Nityananda, and Ananta, and like kind of maintaining us, all of us in this universe. We take this opportunity so that we kind of can take inspiration from Dhruva Maharaj to accept the instructions of our spiritual master as our as Narottam Das Thakur says, as our life and soul, and render whatever we are trying to do for the pleasure of our spiritual master, for the pleasure of Guru Varga, and ultimately for the pleasure of divine couple. And with that, I end the discussion. If there are any corrections or comments, the floor is open. There is nothing. I think we can end. Once again, happy Balram Jayanti for everyone. वाञ्छा कल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्यैव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो